For us that don't know you, I don't know you, I haven't met you yet. Can you tell us something about yourself?
That's my first page of notes. Yes, exactly.
Just reminded him he's got to go over that.
Exactly. I actually thought about it, but before I get to that, somebody look up some verses. I got two sections, two little passages. Somebody look up Leviticus 26, verses 15 through 17. Anybody want to take Leviticus 26? And then I got Joshua 3:3.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Joshua 3:3.
Joshua 3:3. Well, there'll be a couple more, but I'll let you go to Joshua 3:3, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, you make a good point. I thought that it would be good to give you guys an introduction. You're like, who is this guy? Because for one thing, we've only been in this class for 6 weeks, so we are new. I was actually quite shocked when a couple weeks ago Mike asked me to teach, because I'm like, we're not even members of the church yet. And where we came from, you had to get approval for somebody to teach in your class. And he's like, you can do it. It's like, okay, if you say so. But I go way back, but I'll try to go fast here. I was saved as a kid. I was one of those people that was raised in church. My parents, my grandparents. So we kind of have the heritage. That's why I couldn't help but notice when I look at you guys' prayer list how many different people are on the list for family members for salvation. And Lisa and I just come from families where, all your uncles, aunts, nieces, nephews, most of them are professing Christians. So it's kind of odd for us. So that's kind of how we come from. So, it takes a little bit to make that adjustment. When you realize that everybody wasn't raised like that. Skipping way ahead, we were married in 1994. Lisa was from Savannah, and I was transferred to Savannah from Atlanta with my job. And I told everybody when I moved down there that I moved there to find a wife, and sure enough, I'll tell that whole story some other time, but it was a miraculous thing how we met, and we were going to the same church and everything. But we married in 94, and then we were found out about a month after getting married I was going to be transferred. And my job was being eliminated in Savannah, so I was going to have to come back to Atlanta, which didn't surprise me, because if I went down there for a wife, once I got married, I was done. So I was ready to come back anyway. So they said, you got to move back to Atlanta. So 95, we moved back to the Atlanta area, south side of town, and we joined a church called Pinecrest, a Baptist church down there. And we've been there for the last it'll be 30 years in August. So we've been there quite a while. At first, we started teaching in the teen department, and then when we had our son, we stopped in the teen department, and when he was about 3, I think it was, Lisa became the nursery director for 21 years. If you've ever done that, you appreciate what that is. That's a rough job. We did that. Our church relocated. We actually sold our church building, moved somewhere else. In the meantime, in between building and moving, we met in middle school, so we had to meet in there. We had to set up church every Sunday. All the chairs, the nursery, everything had to be set up and taken down every single week. So it was a lot of fun, but that's what we did. And then about 2012, I think it was, 12 or 13, the class that I was in, the teacher asked me to start teaching with him. So we co-taught. We did like you guys do it here every other week. One of us would teach. 2015, the pastor came to me. We reorganized we didn't call it Sunday school, but whatever you want to call it. And we reorganized, and he said, well, you teach a new class. We started a brand new class in 2015, and then I've been teaching that class since 2015. After COVID, we got an extra teacher, and so I've been co-teaching in that class. So I've been teaching for 12 years. Hopefully, when you get done, you leave. Hopefully, you won't say, well, you can't tell you've been teaching 12 years. But I have taught before, so I told Mike that, so I thought, well, maybe that's why he had a little bit of faith in me to teach. So hopefully I won't let you guys down on that part. I'm going to save some of this stuff. Hopefully I'll get to teach again some other time, and I can tell you some more of this. But in 2020, I had some of you guys that we talked about. I had 2 heart surgeries during COVID. I was in the hospital during COVID, which meant for 10 days I was there by myself after having open heart surgery, which was a life-changing experience, which I've got 7 lesson series on that one. When I was in the hospital, I would make notes. Like you couldn't sleep at night. I would sit on my phone and I would write out notes, lessons that I learned, and there were 6 lessons I learned in that experience. And I actually made YouTube videos for our central class. But that's a whole other story for another day again. But we returned to church. So then 2024, last year, I just couldn't help but feel like God was leading us to do something different. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that you ever feel like God just kind of rustles your nest and messes it up to the point where it's so easy to get comfortable and keep on doing the same thing, and I couldn't help but feel like he wanted us to do something different. But then the hard part was leaving our class. I should have warned you guys. I sometimes get a little emotional. That happened in 2020 during the surgery. I don't know what happened. Somebody else came out of the hospital and then went in. But anyway, we had to leave all our friends, which was hard because we'd known them for so long. But then we got to here, and we got to meet some good friends here as well. But we were trying to figure out where to go because we're like, do something different. And I had a friend, I realized this was like 15, 20 years ago, who went to church here. And he talked about how great First Baptist Woodstock. He actually taught one of the classes here. And so we said, well, let's try it up there. So we came up here the week before Thanksgiving and visited church. And we said, yeah, we can go to church there. And so we started looking for a house. We moved in April 2nd. We moved in Canton. So we live in Canton. And we've been in here ever since. We went a few weeks we tried another church. And then we came here, and this is the church for us. We feel like we're going to join after we go through that new members class in July. But love the church and love the class. We couldn't help but feel like the spirit in this class is so much like our other class. And I think it really is because of Mike, his personality. It just kind of permeates the class. There's this family feel. I couldn't help but notice the one of the first or second week we were here. I can't remember the guy's name. Sorry, but the guy that has the neck brace that hurt his neck. That's your husband. He made a statement about, he said, thank you to the people who've, called and sent cards and brought meals and stuff. And I'm like, that's the way our class was. People didn't just say, I'm praying for you. They would actually put actions to the words. And we were a family like that. And so I kind of we felt that in here. We really felt like this is a good class for us. So that's how we ended up here. Anything else? Oh, yeah. So I don't know how long this is going to go this morning. The class that I taught for so many years, we met at 8:45 and ended at 9:30. So we only had 45 minutes. And we even had somebody come and sing every Sunday morning. So our lesson was 20 to 25 minutes. And after 12 years of doing something every Sunday for 20 minutes, you kind of get a clock in your head. So my internal clock is 20, 25 minutes, but I'm not going to let you out in 20, 25 minutes. But it's going to be hard for me to teach for 45 minutes like you guys do. So I had to double my amount of notes. So I have no clue how long we're going to be here today. This introduction was a whole page, but it's a lot of good material. I actually, if you read the book, which hopefully you did, you're going to realize that my lesson is did he use the book? Because I pulled some parts out of the book, but you're going to realize a lot of it actually is a little different angle on this lesson. It's very common, and the book talks about it, it's very common to think about a few of the aspects of it. But I think a lot of times there's a couple things left out about this story, and I want to add to it that should help us, because it makes me nervous about my own life and makes me question myself. So I think it'd be good for all of us. So now we're officially going from transition from introduction to lesson, because you're going to get confused for sure here in a minute. I have to apologize before I start this, but anyway, you guys have baby dedications here. Do y'all do that here? You'll do? Okay, I can't remember if I've seen one since we've been here. Have they? Okay. So anyway, after the dedication of his baby brother in church, Jason sobbed all the way home in the back seat of the car. His father asked him 3 times, "What is wrong?" Finally, the boy replied, "That preacher said he wanted us brought up in a Christian home, but I want to stay with you guys."
We all act like that.
And isn't it true, though, that our kids know us better than anybody else, right? You can fake it at church, and you can fake it for an hour or two and nobody knows the difference, but your kids see you every day. They see you in the good times and the bad. And I couldn't help but think, we've been talking about Israel. There was a real problem with passing on their faith, right? Because then when we see the cycle of them doing good and then doing bad, and it's like, are you guys teaching your kids? You couldn't help but wonder what's going on. The kids are watching the parents, and there's something missing in the life of Israel, because we see that pattern of them following God, doing their own thing, God punishes them, they repent, and then they go back again. So we're going to kind of go backwards a little bit. We're going all the way back to Joshua. I figured if I had 45 minutes, I might as well go back a little ways. I want to get a little backdrop to what's going on in this passage, because it's very important to understand that you can read this passage and you can get a story out of it, or you can get the application out of it. I want us to get the application, which is there was a reason the events occurred in this story. So I want to go back to Joshua. Again, you guys know that, I assume that was in your book back when you hit Joshua. But Joshua led the people into the promised land. They were commanded to drive out all the inhabitants, right? He said, drive out all the inhabitants. So remember, they split the land up amongst the different 12 tribes. And they said, you're supposed to drive the inhabitants out. But what did they do? They let people stay behind. And I was looking up Jerusalem. And even like in Jerusalem, the Benjamites didn't drive out all the Jebusites. But this went on at all the different places. I don't know if you guys listen to Southern gospel music or not. It's kind of old-fashioned nowadays. But Southern gospel songs, and they would talk about crossing over Jordan. Like crossing over Jordan meant that you were dying and going to heaven. But there's no way that's really what crossing over the Jordan is, because when they crossed the Jordan, guess what they had to do? They had to fight, right? They had to fight. Battles faced them. When you go to heaven, you're not going to be fighting battles. So there's no way in the world. Crossing over Jordan would be is akin to the victorious Christian life. And the victorious Christian life occurs when you get rid of sin and you knock out everything. But the thing is, we have a habit inside of us to think, well, I can let that little group, I can let that sin hang around, or I can let this hang around.
In defense of gospel music, crossing over the Jordan means going into the promised land.
Yes, yeah. But if you think of promised land being heaven, it's not accurate. You're right. Promised land is this promised land. Yeah. But I forgot where I was now.
You were saying a little bit of sin.
Yes, a little bit of sin. A little bit of sin. We think about, they would say, well, we're going to keep these people here and they can be our servants. We'll let them serve us. They can cut down wood for us, whatever. And then guess what happened, of course? These are the same people that we see over and over again later on, are the same people that if they'd driven them out, they wouldn't have been dealing with all the problems that you see in Judges and all the books going forwards, because they didn't do the job. And we do the same things, though. We say, well, I can control this problem. This is small. I can handle this. I'm in charge of this. And the reality is it's going to come back and haunt us. So that's where we find ourselves with the Israelites. Then in Judges, we talked about it. We were here. We actually went one Sunday. We went to two different Sunday school classes. We went one at 8 and one at 11. And then the week before, we went to one that all three lessons were on the same the same chapter. I think it was Judges 4 or something. But in Judges, you see the pattern of sin followed by judgment, followed by them crying out for help. And then you had a period where they actually followed God's leader, only to go back and do the same thing they were doing before. And so we finally reached 1 Samuel. We talked about last week, I think Mike had chapters 1 through 3. So in 1 Samuel, we pick up the story. Wow, my notes. I put Samuel's sons. Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Remember, wicked, evil guys. They're supposed to be the priests, and they're doing things they shouldn't be doing. They were very immoral, and everybody knew it. It was not a secret. It wasn't like nobody knew about what was going on. And again, Israel was doing what? They were doing what was right in their own eyes. Exactly. Every man was doing what was right in his own eyes, which is kind of like what goes on in our country today, I think. Their country was divided. Mike mentioned last week the fact that the country was divided. You know, every tribe was doing its own thing. Every person was doing their own thing. The country was living in sin, as you boil it down to. So God brings Samuel on the scene. Last week again, Mike talks about how Samuel, the miraculous birth of Samuel is amazing enough. And then we were sitting there last week and Mike was talking about, imagine his mother taking a 3-year-old child and dropping him off at Eli's house. I mean, that would be hard to do in any case. But if you stop and think about it, we find out, hopefully a spoiler alert here, but he died Eli dies at 98, which is probably like 10 years maybe from, or something around that. So he was in his late 80s. Imagine dropping your 3-year-old off with a guy in his late 80s, and his 2 sons aren't exactly the most reputable people in town, and this is who he raised his last 2. Or you really want to take your kid there? So it was a miracle that his mother wanted to take him there, dropped him off. It was all a divine thing in the first place. God had a plan. And God was working the plan even though they couldn't see it. Israel needed a revival. And that's where we pick up the story today. So we will turn to 1 Samuel chapter 4. We're going to start off by just reading the whole chapter to get the whole story. It is 22 verses, but I can read fairly fast. And then we're going to go back through. I actually have an outline. Normally, I didn't have a clue how to operate the slides. I normally used to project my notes on the slide so you guys could see them, but maybe one day I'll figure out how those things operate. Let's start verse 1. And the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines. Philistines, I don't know what you want to call them. I may call them all three before it's done, but let's call them the Philistines. They encamped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines encamped at Aphek. The Philistines drew up in line against Israel. When the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the field of battle. And when the people came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, "Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies." So the people sent to Shiloh and brought from there the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. As soon as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout so that the earth resounded. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shouting, they said, "What does this great shouting in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" And when they learned that the ark of the Lord had come to the camp, the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "A god has come into the camp." And they said, "Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us, who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods?" Notice it's plural. Hopefully in your Bible it's also a lowercase g, which tells us they didn't really realize who it even was. "These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness." Think about how far back that actually was. You've counted up the years. We think about how many years was it just to get through Judges. This was hundreds of years before. We think about how old our country is and we think it's old. Reality was there's been more time passed between the events in Egypt and this story than our country's even, the age of our country. But they're still remembering the story. They still remember that story is going around. So take courage. Because somebody gets up and says, "Take courage and be men, O Philistines, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews as they have been to you. Be men and fight." So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and they fled every man to his home, and there was a very great slaughter. For 30,000 foot soldiers of Israel fell. And the ark of God was captured, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died. This man of Benjamin ran from the battle line and came to Shiloh the same day, with his clothes torn and with dirt on his head. When he arrived, Eli was sitting on his seat by the road watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and told the news, all the city cried out. When Eli heard the sound of the outcry, he said, "What is this uproar?" Then the man hurried and came and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were set so that he could not see. The man said to Eli, "I am he who has come from the battle. I fled from the battle today." And he said, "How did it go, my son?" He who brought the news answered and said, "Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has also been a great defeat among the people. Your two sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured." As soon as he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and heavy, for he had judged Israel 40 years. Now his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant, about to give birth, and when she heard the news that the ark of God was captured, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed and gave birth, for her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the women attending her said to her, "Do not be afraid, for you have borne a son." But she did not answer or pay attention. And she named the child Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel," because the ark of God had been captured, and because of her father-in-law and her husband. And she said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured." So our first point here, again, there's 3 points. I would have put them on the screen. I don't know if you guys take notes or not, but the first point is the dilemma that Israel faced here. It says in this passage that the Israel camped at Ebenezer. The word Ebenezer means the stone of God's help. Ebenezer was about 20 miles from the city of Shiloh. When we think about Israel, we always think about Jerusalem being the capital or whatever, but at this point in time, Jerusalem had not become the capital of Israel. It was Shiloh. Shiloh was the center of everything. Shiloh was where the ark was. Shiloh was where Eli was. That was where worship was done. So this was a central point, 20 miles away to Shiloh. There's a gnat up here. 20 miles to Shiloh. So Eli was there along with the Ark of the Covenant. And we're going to talk a lot about the Ark of the Covenant because it's quite an important focal point, because every single person that gets upset in this story gets upset about the Ark of the Covenant. Eli, all of them, they're not worried about Hophni and Phinehas. They're all worried about the Ark. But there's a problem. It sounds really spiritual that they're so excited about the Ark, but the reality is they have a flaw in their thinking, which we'll talk about the Ark. So Israel in this first battle suffers a great defeat. 4,000 men died. Now, I've got a theory for you here, because there's no way to prove what verse 1 says. I've heard many times people say that in this passage, this first battle, at least, Israel just went out and did what they wanted to do. But then I ask, well, what does the first verse mean when it says, and the word of Samuel came to all Israel? Now, it doesn't tell us what he told them, but it says that, and then the second verse says that Israel went out to battle. So I'm kind of hypothesizing that Samuel told them to go for the first battle. I don't think they necessarily lost the first battle because they decided to do what they want to do. Now, the second battle is a whole other story. We'll get to that in a minute. But to me, this first battle, because it says the word of Samuel came to all Israel. So Samuel said something to them. The next verse says they go out to fight. So I'm sort of thinking those might two be related. But anyway, they go out to fight. 4,000 men die. Then you get to verse 3, and the elders say, why has the Lord defeated us today? Now, this is the elders. This is not the young folk. This is the people that should know. And it's interesting that they made that conclusion. Again, why they thought God did it, there's no way to tell. But at least they had acknowledged that God either caused it or at a minimum He let it happen. But the reality was they should not have been surprised. But the catch was, we'll talk about this several times, is the fact that there was something going on they didn't know about that was quite important. We'll get to that in a minute. So whoever had Leviticus 26 verses 15 through 17, can you read that?
And if you reject my decrees and abhor my laws and fail to carry out all my commands and so violate my covenant, then I will do this to you. I will bring on you sudden terror, wasting disease and fever that will destroy your sight and sap your strength. You will plant seed in vain because your enemies will eat it. Read 17 as well.
17, yes.
I will set my face against you so that you will be defeated by your enemies. Those who hate you will rule over you, and you will flee even when no one is pursuing you.
So there's a statement there that if you do not obey my commands, the phrase that I called out of that verse, and it was in verse 17 there, I will set my face against you. Now stop and think for a minute. Can you imagine if God decides that He is now against you? And that's the situation that Israel is in at this point, and they don't even realize what's going on. I will set my face against you. So God had said, if you obey me, I will bless you. But if you disobey and break my laws, then I'm going to curse you. There's no middle ground with God when it related to the Israelites. There was no, I'm just going to leave you alone. And we see that with, yes?
You're bringing up the Ark of the Covenant. The covenant was the blessing and the cursing.
You're exactly right. That's actually my next class question. You're right. Yes, I was getting ready to ask that because, I kind of gave the answer too, didn't I? My next question for you guys was going to be, we talk about the Ark of the Covenant, and I think a lot of times we forget, well, what is the covenant? If it's the Ark of the Covenant, then we should know what the covenant is. And the covenant is, you want to tell us again?
That's the blessings and the curses. That was back in Exodus.
Yes.
But it's also what Joshua did between Eber and Gershon. They did the blessings and the curses there. That was the covenant.
Yeah. There were a lot of different parts of it. You think about the covenant. There was I will bless them that bless you, and I will curse them that curse you. That kind of relates to the relationship between Israel and the world, so to speak, other countries. But then God's relationship to them was set in that covenant that if you do what I tell you, I'm going to bless you. And everything was great for them. The catch was they didn't put that together, that was what was going on. So when something bad happens, they knew God was against them, but they really didn't quite fully get the story. They didn't realize that. So when we talk about the dilemma they faced, when you first look at this story on the surface, the dilemma seems like it's the Philistines, the fact that they've come, but that is not the problem. The dilemma that God faced was that God was against them and they didn't even know it. They didn't learn that God was against them until they went out to battle. Imagine not even knowing it. And I think about, it was a few weeks ago, we talked about Samson, Judges 16:20. The verse says, but he did not know that the Lord had left him. Remember when he got his hair cut? Delilah has somebody come in and cut his hair, and then she calls the Philistines to come in and take him, and he thinks he's going to jump up like he did every other time and defeat him. And he gets up, and then he has his strength is gone. And it says in that verse that he did not know the Lord had left him. I have a couple of scary thoughts here for us, for ourselves, is one scary thought is to have God against us and not even know it. I think David realized this. Remember in Psalm 139, he said, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. It's so easy for us to deceive ourselves into thinking that everything is okay. We can justify those little sins and think that everything is okay, and we overlook them, and so we think we're fine, right? Our relationship with God is fine because we don't see the sin that's in our lives. And so it's so easy to deceive ourselves. Israel didn't even realize how bad a condition they were in. Another scary thought is to live our lives and even do good things like serving the Lord without even doing it in His power and not even realizing it. It's so easy to get up and do stuff and just do it in your own power. It's not until you get to try something really, really hard, right? Then you find out that if God's not with you, you can't do it. But there's so many things in our daily life that we can do, and we can generate enough power to get it done, and we don't even realize that we're doing it all ourselves, and God's not even involved in it. I heard a pastor once say that there's a lot of churches that their average Sunday morning service, if the Holy Spirit didn't show up, you'd never even know the difference. The people in the service wouldn't even know the difference. They had their singing, everything went great, and they never even realized the Holy Spirit was not moving in the service because they were just used to it like that. And to get to that point is rather scary in our lives to not even notice that. So then in verse 3, the second half of verse 3 through verse 8, they formulated this plan. So they said, okay, we're defeated. Here's our solution. We're going to go get the Ark of the Covenant. And they said in the verse that it may come among us and save us, as if the Ark had saving power for them. This was their plan. Again, this is the point where at this point they could have stopped and asked God, hey, wait a minute, is there something we should do? But they didn't. So here's my question. This is one I think actually came out of the book. What are we saying practically to or about God when we trust in what things can do rather than placing our trust in Him? What are we saying to or about God when we trust in what things can do rather than placing our trust in Him?
It doesn't, it's not the most important thing to you. It's just kind of apathetic.
Yeah. Anybody else? I think this one was in the book. You guys are normally really talkative.
Well, I'm just thinking about what you were saying. I mean, when we go back to the covenant, the covenant involved the Ten Commandments. So the Ten Commandments, thou shalt have no other God before it. Mm-hmm. But they're making the ark out to be an idol. And that's probably what you're probably going to get to that in your lesson as well. I don't say anything, but that would become a God to them instead of God, and that's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier and that's what legalism is. I always think about this. Legalism is when we come up with a set of rules. I don't care if it's a liberal or a conservative. 1, 2, 3. If I do this, I'm okay. Instead of having the relationship with God. And the problem is, in that, God a lot of times throws a monkey wrench in there, so we have to trust Him, which is kind of what we see here.
it's so easy to I'll give you an example. Money. It's easy to get to where God has blessed us monetarily, maybe, and our finances are good, and it's easy to just think, well, I'm self-sufficient, right? And then sometimes it takes that health problem or that family problem or that health problem, and then all of a sudden realize that I can't do anything anymore. And then you realize it. Sometimes we don't even realize it. That's why I say a minute ago, we don't realize that we're relying on the wrong thing. And that's, of course, what Israel's doing here. Like you're saying, they're relying on it, and it's going to get even worse if we start digging into it. So let me ask you guys another question. Well, let me bring up a point from verse 4 that you don't hear very often. So Hophni and Phinehas, of course, were at the temple, which would have been their normal hangout place. And so when they went to get the ark, Hophni and Phinehas were there. So they came along with the ark, which that's goes along with the story we're going to get to. But in verse 4, there's a statement in there that you don't hear often. It says, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim. Anybody know what that means, that he was enthroned on the cherubim? You remember the ark wooden box, but on the top, it had the gold. It was gold covered. And then you had the cherubims on each corner. And then what was the top called? Remember the mercy seat. And what it's saying is he is enthroned. In other words, this is like God's throne on earth. It was kept in the Holy of Holies. It was kept in the most sacred place. The average person could never go into this place. Because remember, back then, you couldn't go straight to God with your problems. You couldn't go to God in this time. You had to go to the priest, and the priest went to God. Thankfully, we don't have to do that now. But at this time, so when it says he was enthroned on the cherubim, this is like God's figurative throne on earth. So it kind of becomes real important when they start using it like a good luck charm. So let me ask you another question. I know you know the answer to this one. What was inside the Ark of the Covenant? 10 Commandments. The manna. What was the third one?
Stick of Aaron.
The Aaron's rod that budded. Right. The three items in there. So you stop and think about those three things. First of all, the Ark of Covenant was a symbol. It was not a magic thing. It was, and we'll get into why they kind of believe this, but the 10 Commandments were the law of God. This was God's precepts. The manna represented God's provision, and the Aaron's rod that budded represented God's power. So in this case, we see a symbol of God's law, His precepts, His provision, and His power. And I heard it a few weeks ago, the guy preached about baptism, and use the analogy of your wedding, that baptism is just a symbol, just like your wedding ring is a symbol. Well, the same thing applied to the ark here. The ark is a symbol. My wedding ring is a symbol that I'm married. It's a symbol of my vows. It doesn't keep me married, though, right? If I take it off, I don't become unmarried. Now, here's another thought, though. Imagine the absolute hypocrisy of wearing my wedding ring while having an affair. Would that not be like a slap in the face? Well, that's kind of what we're going to see here with the Ark of the Covenant. So Israel brings the symbol of God's law, His provision and His power, like a good luck charm to help them win the battle. And at the same time, they were living a lifestyle that was totally thumbing their nose at God and saying, we're going to do what we think is right. We're going to do what we want to do. We don't care about your law, but we still expect you to bless us anyway. How brazen.
That's apparent, too, because they lost the battle. So they already lost the battle instead of going to God and asking God, why did we lose the battle?
Yeah.
I mean, you're God. Why did we lose the battle? They went and get the good luck charm.
Yes.
They
thought
manipulate God.
So let's back up a minute and let's think about their mindset. What were they thinking? Well, there was some logic in their thought. We bash them. We bash Israel pretty easy. It's easy to do because it's easy to second guess somebody afterwards anyway, right? So let's stop and think about what they could have been thinking. There was some precedent that had been set, that what they saw that seemed like this made sense to them. So let's not jump on them too quick. Israel called for the ark because they had seen God work with it before, right? What had to happen before they crossed the Jordan River?
The ark kept going to the river.
Who had Joshua 3:3? Do you have Joshua 3:3? Can you read verse 3 and then read verse 14 through 16?
Okay, Joshua 3. I'm going to...
Verse 3.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm read 3, but we'll start at 2.
Okay. Yeah, because they do go together.
So it was, after 3 days, the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. And then 16 and 17.
14 through 16.
14 through 16. So it was, when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan, with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still, and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that was beside Zaretan. So the waters that went down into the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Then the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all Israel crossed over on dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan.
So, I mean, you think about the events in Israel's past that made a mark. Obviously, the events in Egypt, the plagues in Egypt, people remembered it. But crossing Jordan also was a big one. Remember Jericho, they were still talking about it. So people remembered these events. These were big events. So as they said, whenever the ark goes up, they told Israel, said, just follow behind it. And so as soon as the priests who are carrying the ark, as soon as their feet touch the water stands still. So naturally, it would be easy to think, well, the ark is important, that the ark has some kind of power. The same thing we saw later on, when they went around Jericho. Who was in the front of Jericho? Again, the Ark of the Covenant was leading the trip around Jericho. But the thing is, the ark had nothing to do with the success of what was going on. The reason that all that happened was because God's power was on the ark, but God's power just was represented by the ark. The power came from the fact that they were following what God told them to do. If God says walk around Jericho once a day for 6 days, if that's what you do, no matter how much sense it makes or doesn't make to you, if you do what God commands you, that is where His power is. Again, back to the covenant. The covenant says, if you obey me, I will bless you. So anytime that they were obeying, and they made the mistake of thinking that the ark was the source of the power, instead of realizing that it was their obedience. The obedience was what was giving God's blessing in their life. If the God's blessing, provision, and all was coming, His power all came from not from the ark, but from doing what He told them to do. Their obedience, following the covenant. So when the ark gets there, they're all excited because they think the ark's going to save them. They make this great shout. The Philistines get all panicked because they hear about it, and they think that somehow that this ark was, again, I'm sure they had heard the stories, and they thought that there was some relationship there. We won't get into chapter 5, but chapter 5, if you want to read, just talks about when they steal it, what happens. They didn't realize who Jehovah was. The fact that in this passage it uses the small g tells us, and the fact that they used a plural word for God means they didn't realize it. They just saw the God of Israel just like their God Dagon. That's what they saw. So then the sad part of the story, you get to verse 10 through 22, and we see the defeat that they experienced. So they go back out to battle with this strategy. They lost 4,000 the first time. They lost 30,000 this time. So their good luck charm not only did not help, it actually was a whole lot worse. And I couldn't help but think, yes, why are you surprised again? This is the Ark of the Covenant. So you just took the symbol of the fact that you are supposed to obey God and He will bless you. And you are now living your lives in total rebellion to Him, and you act surprised when He's working against you. It said He set His face against them in Leviticus. I will set my face against you. He is now against them. They could win a battle we saw a few weeks ago with 300 men with Gideon, right? If God is with you, it doesn't matter how many people you have. So it didn't matter what their army was. The problem was the sin in their lives.
They didn't go and ask Eli if God was,
Yes.
That stuff, but the sin that was in the temple, right? God took judgment on Eli and his family, and so Paul, in verse 222, right?
Yeah.
It says that restrained his sons. So therefore, that sin was until all Israel came up to Eli, all knew about it and complained about
Mhm.
his son. Right? So Eli knew it, the whole town knew it,
Yeah.
all of Israel knew it, so the sin was on all of Israel.
Yes.
And if you notice after Eli died, Philistines don't bother anybody anymore. Just point that out.
I think you're reading my notes. That's the next. This is like you managed to get. Yes, that's what we're going to talk about in verses 10 through 22. So what happens? So Israel gets defeated. They lose 30,000 men. The ark of God was taken by the Philistines. Now I sat and I was thinking about why. Why did they take the ark? I mean, if at first they thought the ark had power, but after you just massacred the army that was carrying it, you kind of think, well, maybe it didn't have any power anymore. But at a minimum, it gave Israel hope. If they believed that it was going to make them win, to the point where they were shouting before a battle, you know what? If we take their good luck charm, whether it has any power or not is irrelevant. The fact is, we'll destroy their spirit. And we saw it. Eli's spirit is destroyed when he finds out the ark is gone. His daughter-in-law says the glory of God has departed from Israel just because the ark was gone, not because her husband died. She had to know how wicked he was too, right? I mean, she lived with him. She knew what he was doing immorally as well. She was upset because the ark was gone, because again, she thought the ark had the power. So Hophni and Phinehas get killed, which again probably should not be that surprising because they went with the ark. If your ark was stolen, they were there when they came and took it, so they probably killed the guys holding it, right, or with it. They weren't holding it. So the guys with it.
It's kind of funny when you think about it. I know you didn't talk about this part, but so they knew some things about the ark. You talked about that earlier. Like the reason why they went with it, because nobody could touch it except
Yeah.
who was. So they kind of kept a little bit. They knew that they couldn't carry it.
Yeah.
So that's why Phineas and the other guy was there, is because they knew that if you did touch it,
Yeah.
in the past people got killed for
Oh,
just
yeah.
being close to it.
You're right. You weren't to look inside of it even. Yeah. There's a lot of. It was such a holy thing. We could go into a whole study on the ark and how holy it was. So this man from Benjamin goes back to Shiloh. He runs from the battle. He's all dirty, sweaty, and everything. He shows up. And Eli is sitting there. So now you got to draw this picture in your mind. It's easy to read these stories and stop and not stop and think about it. So Eli is sitting there, and he hears this news. He's waiting. But now, it shouldn't have been that surprising. Eli is sitting beside the side of the road, and he's watching because he wasn't sure what was going to happen. And it says that he feared for the ark of God. But he also knew his two sons went with it. And if you remember, go back to chapter 2, it said some unnamed man of God went to him and predicted that both of his sons were going to die on the same day. And then we had the same thing when God went to Samuel last week, and Samuel gets that prediction, and he has to tell Eli, says, I got to tell you that your sons are going to die, and he's taking the priesthood away from you because of the immorality, the sin you've allowed. You have not restrained your sons, and were taken away. And I'm going to bring somebody else, which of course was Samuel. So all this in mind, Eli had heard these two things. So he already knew these things. Now imagine you're sitting there, your sons just left with the ark to go to a battle. Now I'm pretty sure Hophni and Phinehas, as a general rule, did not join the battles. They were priests, right? They were going to stay where it was safe back at the house. So they had to go to the front. Now think, if somebody tells you that both your sons are going to die, not only die, but on the same day, they go to battle with the country that you're losing to all the time. I kind of think he kind of had a feeling this might happen. I don't think he was shocked at all. And as soon as he knew that the ark was taken, he knew his sons were killed because they were with it, right? So he's sitting there I don't know if he's sitting in a chair. It says he's sitting by the gate. I've heard people say he was sitting on the wall. Whatever he was sitting on, he had a chair because it says his chair. He was sitting in his chair. He obviously had sat there before. And when he gets the news, again, he wasn't concerned about his sons. It was when they heard that the ark had been stolen. Falls out of his chair backward, breaks his neck. It says he was 98 and heavy. So obviously he landed bad and broke his neck. And you hear that story. And here's the thing. The sad part of that statement, the sad part of the story about Eli is not that Eli died, but that Eli didn't even realize that God's power and provision had left Israel long before the ark ever did. He didn't even realize that God's power wasn't on him. He still thought that the ark had power. And the reality was, since you're breaking the covenant, the ark of the covenant is working against you, not for you. It's actually the opposite of what they were thinking. Israel suffered their defeat. This all started back at Shiloh. The problems they were having all started back at home because the problem was ultimately a heart problem. They had a problem with their heart. They had a problem with the relationship with God. And it was just bearing fruit in this battle with the Philistines. The chapter 4 ends with Eli's daughter-in-law giving birth, naming her son Ichabod, meaning the glories departed from Israel. And again, she said it because the ark of God had been taken, not because God had turned his face against them. She didn't see it either. None of them realized that the problem was the way they were living. And that's what Samuel is there for. Samuel is there to bring a revival to Israel and to bring this knowledge that you've got to fix this relationship with God. You've got to change the way you're seeing things, or God's not going to bless you. If you guys read in the book, the title of this lesson was God Disciplines His People. And this is absolutely correct. He says it in the New Testament that if I'm not chastening you, then you're not even one of my own. That's how you can tell you're a child. I mean, you don't correct other people's kids, but you're supposed to be correcting your own kids. And so God doesn't stay neutral with his children. Sin and disobedience have consequences. And the reality is we do the same thing. We take this story and you got to apply it to ourselves today. We make light of God when we cherish the things of God more than God himself. It's so easy for us to thank God for his blessings and not realize that God is the blessing in and of himself. And we should seek God's guidance and follow it rather than going our own way. How many times, I can raise my hand, I can give you some stories, I'm not going to. How many times can you think of where you just decided to do something and you did it, you might have justified it in your own head how it was a great idea, and it didn't exactly turn out, and then we either ask God to fix our problem that we created ourselves, or we just say, here, I'm going to do this, and you bless what I want to do. I think we've all done it at some point in time. So our questions to ponder, these are actually in the back of the chapter. These are, again, consider these rhetorical questions. So just think in your mind. Don't answer out loud. But what erroneous things have you thought about God when facing adversity? I mean, sometimes I know I've thought, well, does God care? I don't think we ever question that God can fix things. I think we sometimes question if he cares enough or if he wants to. Sometimes I actually question, and that one is like, well, is God against me? Is there something wrong? Have I done something and God is against me and everything's going bad because I've got a sin and something's wrong and I've done something wrong? It makes you stop. It should make you stop and question. And the last thought was, what should our attitude toward God be when there's a potential for defeat? I couldn't help but think, again, I talked about this a lot about my other class. I mentioned having surgery. After being in the hospital, I was having, I won't get into the details, but I was having an issue, and it was Sunday night. I had a few rough days, and on Sunday night, I remember praying and praying and praying, and I just got to the point where I just said, I can't make it another day if you don't help me. And they had tried so many different things, and it wasn't working. And then I hadn't eaten from Wednesday through Sunday. And then the Monday morning I woke up and I was just a little better. Just enough to where I knew God had helped. And I could make it again another day. I could make it one more day. But you know what? Sometimes we have to get to that point in our lives where God has to put something in our lives that gets us to the point where we really, truly have to trust in Him. And we really should be thankful for those things. It's so easy to sometimes complain about problems, but that's how God draws us close to Him. We don't get close to Him in the good times. We get close to Him because in the good times, we start taking Him for granted. And it's so easy to think that we're taking care of stuff. So there's a lot of blessing in it. So the story here, there was sin in their lives. I'm not sure where I guess. Are we having class next week? I had heard the debate.
Bring that up. We don't have class.
Yeah, we don't have class next week. I don't know. I thought somebody was mentioning that before. You guys were talking about that. I don't think we have class next week, but I think the following week the lesson is back. I don't know if you might be teaching the next lesson. But then we're going to get in our next book. You guys got the next book. as you go through Samuel, we're going to see how God's working to try to revive Israel. But Israel's still got the same problem, right? They still want to do things their way. They want a king like everybody else. But God doesn't give up on them. God loves His people just like He loves us, and He's going to keep on working. Even when He has to chasten them and He has to chasten us, He's going to continue to work in their lives to draw them to Him. Oh, we're actually pretty close on time. So let's close in prayer. Dear Lord, we love You. We thank You for Your word. We thank You that You've given us these stories to admonish us, to correct us as well, that we can see from the example of Israel how they've failed in their lives, failed in their decisions, and we do the same thing so many times in our lives, Lord. We pray we'll learn from what we've read. We'll be able to apply it to our lives, Lord, to serve You better and live better, Lord. We pray to be in the service to come, Lord, that we'll hear Your word, be open and receptive to what You have for us. We just ask all these things in Your precious Son's name. Amen.